Welcome to the Return on Lifestyle podcast with Rey Descalso from Privada Wealth Management. In this podcast, we help you overcome financial worries and make sense of planning, investing, insurance, and banking. Join us for this journey as Rey draws from his expertise and interviews brilliant minds to help you enjoy life. The best is yet to come.
Hello and welcome to Return on Lifestyle with Rey Descalso from Privada Wealth Management. Today we're going to be talking about how to find balance in retirement. Good morning, Rey. How are you?
Good morning, sir. I'm doing fantastic and just delighted to be here and honored to have folks listen to me as they're driving their car, mowing their yard, sitting back on their back porch, watching the sunset.
Nice. Now, finding balance in retirement, are you talking about like yoga and Pilates and things that are going to help us find that balance? Because I've got pretty good balance, but I cannot do yoga to save my life.
Yeah. I'm probably not the guy to talk to you about yoga. I've tried it maybe 3 or 4 times, and it's so humbling. I decided I would go on to other pursuits. Funny you should say that, though, because actually I'm sitting in my chair here talking to you, and I'm sore because I did some gardening with the wife yesterday. Yeah. So I'm like aches and pains everywhere. Gardening for us is her telling me where to put things. I'm just the muscle kind of thing. It's all decorative and so forth. So it's just
you and I have the same job, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I'm good for it. She's the brains. I'm the brawn. So I could do some yoga. Probably should. Yeah. But no, the balance I'm talking about, as I look at my practice over the years, you run into different stories. And that's what I love the most about this job is living life vicariously through folks who are coming up on retirement or in retirement and making that transition. And I've kind of seen a few things over the years that I've taken note of and formulated some lessons that I wanted to share today about having a satisfying retirement and kind of some of the things that impede that and what to do about it.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. So a couple of things that come up. Number one thing that comes up when people talk about retirement is they find themselves stressed out. Now, let me go ahead. Before I go any further, let's go ahead and level the playing field. What I mean is take out bad health, because health, as you can imagine, if you're in retirement or approaching retirement, retirement can really get ruined by health. So obviously health is the number one thing. Do the doctor's visits, eat right, take your meds, whatever it is, health is the baseline. And I'm taking that out of the equation. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then also I would say, take out the idea of financial stress. I'm going to say, in the examples that I'm going to give you here, all things being equal, we've got good health and we have enough money to cover the expenses we've planned for, because those are the two things I think you have to have as your foundation. All right. That gets you a good retirement. Now I want to talk about what impedes you from a great retirement. And one of the things that I find is that people find themselves having a lot of stress. And the reason they have a lot of stress, let me define that stress. And that is simply because retirement is change. It is a transition. And, one of the funny things is back in my days when I was in ministry, and maybe this is the case with you, but back when I was in ministry, I would be speaking in front of my congregation, and giving the message. And I could look out at the audience, and depending on which service it was, I could know exactly where each church member or their family would be sitting. I mean, down to literally 1 or 2 pews, and 3 or 4 seats over. And I noticed that. I'm like, that is just the weirdest thing. Everybody sits in the same place.
Creatures of habit.
Yeah. So, and then the funny thing about it would be, you don't know that you're visiting, or you're a guest of somebody. And so you walk in, you're like, oh, I think I'd like to be close to the door. I think I'd like to be up front. I'd like to be in the back. And so you sit there, and this church member who's been going there for 50 years or 5 years, it doesn't matter. You're in their spot. And you've just become a thorn in their flesh. You have just become a stumbling block in their faith. Right. Because, now they're just in a mood. They're in a tizzy. And to me, it seemed kind of silly, but it's true with me as well, because, you put your toothbrush in a certain space every single time, and someone comes, you'll have someone come and help you do something and they don't do it right. Change is difficult. And I think one of the things that people have to realize is that there's going to be change when you retire. whether it's the fact that you're not showing up to work, whether it's not that you don't have the same friends that you're seeing every day. There's a lot of different change. And so you have to kind of realize that that stress is going to be there. Another one that I see is a lot of folks are disappointed in the sense that my grandmother, may she rest in peace, when she was with us, one of her favorite songs was an old song about a young lady who goes to the fair or the circus, and the song is, is that all there is? She goes there and she's like, that's it, I mean, that's the big show, so to speak, and disappointment. And a lot of times I think when you have something that you've been retiring for 40 years for, that's a little bit of pressure, like there's this thing called retirement, and you get sold quite a bit, like, hey, it's going to be amazing, it's going to be awesome. Well, the truth is the sun comes up, you look in the mirror, it's still the same person. And also too, oftentimes we front load all of the fun in retirement and a lot of the spending. When it comes to spending in retirement, typically it's like a barbell. It's the first 3 years and the last 3 years of retirement that you really spend a lot of the money. And that's because you're going to want to take those vacations and you're going to want to buy that camper, and you're going to want to do a lot of those things up front. And then that's the first 3 years. And then, of course, the last 3 years, unfortunately, typically can be medical expenses, right? But as far as the disappointment goes on the front end of it, folks are thinking, hey, there's just going to be this huge payoff. And there typically is, it's a new chapter in your life. There's that excitement, but it does ultimately wear off. And you've probably had that happen in life where something was exciting, and then after a while, it becomes just like everything else. And so I'll talk with a client or two, and a lot of the things we do here in Florida are cruises. We're not far from some of the ports. You can drive to a port and go on a cruise, and they're a blast. Don't get me wrong. But after a while, if you do something enough times, it becomes boring. And so I see that happen quite a bit. My father is a golfer and a gardener, and he loves gardening. Maybe that's why I don't like gardening. I think because as a kid, he always used to make me, hey, come on out here and help me. I'm like, this is just torture me. It's Florida. It's the summer, and he loves it.
Oh, man, yeah.
Yeah, it restores him and so forth. And golf is probably the same way. I'm not good at golf. He's fantastic at it. I don't have the hand-eye coordinations. But one thing, my father is 76 years old, and he still works. He only works about 30 hours a week, which for him is part-time, and he enjoys it. And I talked to him about it. When do you think you're going to really, really retire? And it's like, hey, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And more importantly, what am I going to do? Am I going to, spend more time in the garden? Am I going to spend more time golfing? Well, then golfing just becomes work. It just becomes more of the same. And so by him having that work, it gives him something to look forward to. Say, hey, I'll go golfing, or I'll spend some time in the garden. I'll take this weekend and relax. But having that, and so what we see is in retirement would be like eating a diet of all one flavor, or eating a diet of all one food. After a while, you got to have something to counteract it. And it doesn't have to be necessarily work. It can be something else. And I want to talk about those other else things as well. But the way I look at it is cookies and milk. Milk by itself, it's okay. There's nothing, it's not great. Cookies, fantastic. But I'm telling you, and I've done this, if you eat an entire package of cookies, even the really good Girl Scout cookies, after a while, you're just like, there's something missing. All it takes is a little bit of a sip of milk, and man, you are ready to go for another package. And don't ask me why. I know that. But that's
Thin
why.
Mints.
Yeah. See, for me,
it's Thin Mints.
Everybody talks Thin Mints, and I've got nothing against Thin Mints. Okay, this is not an anti-Thin Mint podcast. All right, I want to just put that out there. I don't want this to be controversial, but Caramel Delights are fantastic.
That's my dad's favorite. So I hear you. But Thin Mints for me, Caramel Delights for him. I got it.
That's my wife. My wife will buy 2 or 3 boxes. And my daughter's actually looking at getting into Girl Scouts. They call them something else. I forget what it's called, but that's the whole reason she's getting in, because she thinks that it's the cookie club.
There's got to be a discount on cookies, right? If you're in. That's I'll join if that's the case.
Right. In fact, on my next podcast, I'd like you to please send your checks to mydaughter.com for Thin Mints. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. By the way, just a pro tip: put them in the freezer.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
eat them
That's
straight out of the freezer. All right.
Oh,
Enough
man,
about that.
that's good. That's good. Actually, it's lunchtime where I'm at, so this is probably getting a little off topic. But yeah, so the dietary balance thing, and that's really where I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about, and there's a lot of other things too that you see come up when it comes to folks who are not completely satisfied in retirement. Restlessness, disappointment, stress, and where I've over the years talking with folks, like what are the ingredients? There's probably more than what I'll share with you now. But what are the ingredients to create a balanced retirement? Just like when we're cooking a great dish, too much salt, too much sugar, too much fat, too much burnt temperature. How can we balance it? And so I wanted to go through 4 of them, and I think it'll resonate with you, and I think it will help you to kind of see that in retirement, much like in regular life, we can have an amazing retirement, and it's more than just money, and it's more than just vacation. So I call these the 4 C's of coping, because they're all kind of coping mechanisms. They're great for handling negativity. The number 1 that is super important is community. Okay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And they're all going to start with the letter C just to make my life easier. Okay.
All right.
So when it comes to community, one of the things that was really interesting that came out, I think a year or 2 ago, is the Harvard Health Publishing, Harvard Medical School came out with a report, and it had been 8 decades of research from Dr. Waldinger of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And basically it took 700 men since they were teenagers in 1938 and followed them. And now they're in their 90s and they're still doing it. And what they found out is that, a couple key things. Number 1, obviously, the community is important, but let me kind of drill down. Social connections appear to be really good for your health. So when you talk about heartbreak, it's a real thing. When someone loses their spouse, the chances of them passing away very soon thereafter are really high because that community bond, that social connection has been broken. And so look around you. Are you lonely? Do you have those friends and family around you? And I don't know that, obviously back in the 1938, they didn't have Facebook, And so is Facebook and is social media helping or is it hurting? I think that's a really good question. They don't have the answer to that. But it is kind of nice, the fact that my in-laws can see my daughter's pictures in real time. And so there is a beautiful thing about that. I imagine there's some negatives as well. But
I think that's exactly what you just described, is that your in-laws get to see pictures of your daughter, right? But that's a snapshot.
Yeah.
Any social media is a snapshot. And if you have someone who is retired and a lot of their community is based on Facebook or any other social media where they are posting and trying to interact with people on these social media platforms, it's still just a snapshot. The other person may not even be online, and then they're just waiting for a response, or just waiting for something to happen on this platform that truly isn't a relational connection or as deep of a relational connection as what they need to fulfill exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And if you see a snapshot of my life, it's going to be the highlight reel of my life. And so I look at that, and there's this FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, I'm not eating a cookie right now. I'm not eating Thin Mints like that cool guy Eric is.
Yeah.
I'm eating, spinach. My life is nowhere near as interesting. And so actually it can increase loneliness, and loneliness is toxic. So
exactly.
And then also too, family and friends that you have is also relationship quality. High conflict relationships are bad. So getting your community and getting involved in community and building those good relationships, in addition to everything else you're doing in your retirement, make that a point. In other words, if I sit down with a client or prospective client and say, what are your goals for retirement? They say, okay, Winnebago, home in North Carolina mountains. They think I'm asking them, and I am. I'm asking them about assets and expenditures and so forth, and income needs. But really, a goal should be deeper quality relationships. At the time, let's make that a thing. And so I want to put that out there because it sounds kind of, everybody knows that. No, it's not something that's going to happen unless you put your foot on the gas, and say, this is going to be how I spend my retirements, in investing in investing in my community and my relationships that are around me. And we got to watch it because obviously as we get older and as we, or I should say, as we get more advanced in society, we can also become more disconnected. So community, when it works, and you got to work at it, is a beautiful antidote to some of the disappointment and stress and restlessness and purposeless and disconnectedness of that can happen in retirement. So the other thing I want to share with you, and this is going to seem kind of silly maybe, but so the first C, I call it community. The second C I call consumption. Now, that probably doesn't sound very high-minded, but bear with me for just a second. One of the things that you've done your whole life is you have delayed gratification. You have pushed you've pushed your expenditures, you pushed your consumption into the future by putting money away. And you said, no, I'm not going to do that. I think one of the things that people need to realize is that oftentimes when they come into retirement, and this is going to sound crazy, but they don't actually spend enough. Now, what I mean by that is people who are successful at saving money got there because they don't do what? They don't actually spend money. What I would say is I would say, you have to, as you approach retirement, and this is always a balance, right? You have to look at it and say, this is it. This is my opportunity to really enjoy X, Y, Z. So for instance, I mentioned the cruise person. I had a couple came to me and they're like, well, we really are saving our money and we're really doing well. And we've got 3 or 4 more years. And our plan is in about 5 years, actually, our plan is to go into an Alaskan cruise. And I said, tell me more about that. And they explained the Alaskan cruise. They explained what friends had done and so forth and what they were up to. And we looked at their finances and I said, how much does it cost? Okay, good. What's your, the whole financial planning thing. And I said, you'll have to forgive me, but they were both school teachers. I said, you have the summers off, correct? And you don't have to work during this month. If the numbers work, why don't you go now, 5 years earlier, at 60 rather than 65? And they kind of looked at each other. Is that allowed? And so
yeah, absolutely.
We look at each other like we've got this parental unit in the sky, that's telling us don't have fun now. And I think one of the issues is for folks, and this could be a money thing, this could be a math thing, but oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's talking with somebody and saying, is this a legitimate opportunity to really enjoy the fruits of my labor? And people will tell you to watch out for, consumptionism, to watch out for all the marketing of capitalism. And I understand that can be an addiction in itself, but it is definitely something, consuming too much of food and alcohol and clothes and travels and toys and stuff will eventually lose its shine. But I think consumption also too is the spice of life. It is the thing that makes it fun. And then if you combine it with community, in other words, if you're in relationships that are awesome and you're also having fun together, man, that is a force multiplier. So I think consumption, I promote it. And I think having a financial plan where you look at it and say, hey, am I really spending this money in a way that's going to give me the biggest payoff? It's a good idea. So that's number one is going to be your community. Number two is consumption, really conscious consumption, like really to stretch every joy out of every penny you spend. And then second, I would say, is something that we need more and more people who are in retirement to do, and that is creativity. And the reason that creativity is so important is, we are just by design, we are little creators. Since you were born, when you were a little kid, my daughter, I keep talking about my daughter and I apologize, but it's what I see every day.
No, don't apologize. This is great.
Yeah. She will just take, the stories that we tell her, we read her in books, the cartoons that she watches, the things she hears at school. And she'll spend about 30, 45 minutes in her room just telling stories with her little dolls and her little trinkets and so forth. And we'll listen in on her and it just, brings joy to our hearts. And then this morning, she'll tell me, oh, guess what happened in this story yesterday? Like it's some sort of novel that she's writing. And I think one of the reasons why I like doing this podcast and I like writing blogs is because there's just something in us that has to create. And it doesn't have to be a podcast. It doesn't have to be writing. It could be music, it could be cooking. It could be planning events. It could be gardening. Not me, but for you, somebody out there listening, it could be gardening. And so one of the issues I think that, and this obviously looks a lot like hobbies, but sometimes what we don't realize is that we forget how important creativity is and how much joy it can bring you. And so I think it's a really great idea to take time and create almost a job of it to exercise that creativity muscle. And so that creativity muscle, it's different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm finding more and more times as I ask folks, what do you do with your free time? They oftentimes feel kind of guilty about it because, creativity, like for instance, cooking or gardening, it's going to cost money. So they look at it as something, well, that's a net negative. I'm like, no. You don't have to qualify your hobby in terms of expenditures, because if it is giving you that sense of creativity, it will bring interest and it will bring joy to a lot of other things. You're going to release a new type of dopamine in your brain, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So don't feel guilty about that time spent, and don't feel guilty if it costs money to do it. And who knows, sometimes you can also turn it into a side business if you want to paint this or do different things. And so creativity is huge, and I believe it leads to a clearer mind and just a feeling of accomplishment that oftentimes is gone. Because in retirement, this is important. In retirement, you're not really doing anything. You're not creating something. You're not working and producing. That's the word I'm looking for. You're not producing.
Yeah.
And especially for the male listeners out there, we tend to think in terms, for whatever reason, that, hey, I need to be the hunter and killer. I need to make something, build something, do something. And that's why creating something and making something kind of fills that slot, kind of scratches that itch.
Yeah, and creativity doesn't have to be all arts and crafts.
Right.
And that's, and I know you brought up cooking and you brought up some other things, but one thing just for people to think about, if you are a writer, if you are someone who is a storyteller by nature, or you have just good stories that you'd like to pass on, there's other things you can do, like mentoring. And this may come into, you may be coming into a category that this would fit into better, but mentoring can be a really creative outlet to be able to work with somebody and kind of share your experiences. Or for those that, like I said, are writers or speakers, and I'm not endorsing one group over another, but there's a group called Toastmasters, and you can join Toastmasters and learn to do public speaking in a more effective way, even if you never plan to do public speaking, but just to be able to tell a story in a more effective way and in a fun way, and then create those relationships, create that community. There's just a lot of ways that this kind of all weaves together.
Yeah, it really does. And that's a good point. And you make a great point with Toastmasters community, you've got creativity. And oftentimes with all of these social organizations, they're trying to give back. And that's the fourth C. The fourth C for me is contribution, and saying, okay, and oftentimes they all start to coalesce around contribution, because you have to use all of them to really make a major impact. And so the contribution part, I think one of the issues that you see oftentimes is that it's a balancing act. Well, let me back up. So obviously giving back to the people and the causes that matter most to you is just makes sense. Focusing on others put your own stress into perspective. We're spoiled here, and I do mean spoiled here in Central Florida. I live about, maybe 25 minutes from the back gate to Disney World. And so we'll go, we have passes, and as much as we go, it's not costing very much to even go. And so we'll be able to get great seats because we can plan ahead. And it's funny, you go there and to Disney and you get jaded. It's consumption, it's great shows and they're doing all this fun stuff. This particular time I went to Animal Kingdom and we went to the Lion King, and it's a dancing, it's like, with acrobats, and it's all this fun and so forth. And I was so into getting the very best seat I could get. And so you're kind of elbowing all of these British tourists, and you're really kind of all about the competitive nature of, okay, get a good seat. We got a good seat, and we're sitting there. One row in front of us was a family in blue shirts with white writing on it, and it was Make-A-Wish. And with the Make-A-Wish kids, if you don't know, what they'll do is they'll take the families where one of the children has a terminal illness, and they will fly the family in and have them just have a wonderful time at one of the parks here in town. Could be Disney, could be one of the other parks. We're lucky to have lots of those. And I remember sitting down thinking, I was behind them and they had front row seats, so I was second behind, and I just was so proud of myself and didn't even notice them. And then my wife struck up a conversation with the mother, I believe. And then, of course, as they were talking a little bit, it dawned on her what their shirt said. Yeah. And boy, it just put everything in perspective. I'm like, I'm not even enjoying this. I'm trying to enjoy it so much. I have no concept of how lucky I am. There's no concept of gratitude. And it really just kind of helped me realize once again that if you're giving back, this altruistic way of giving back to your community creates this positive feedback loop. Two ways. Number one, you feel better about the small difference you make. And let's be honest, the difference we make is small. It counts, but it feels like sometimes we're tilting at windmills. But also, two, I think you'll feel better about your own situation and grateful, and that gratitude is fantastic. And so, now having said all this, okay, it's all about balance, right? So with community. You got to be careful, because with community, you got to make sure it's a healthy community. You got to make sure there's not that codependency, and that goes to contribution as well. If you're part of a civic or religious or charitable cause, it can become an all-consuming. Hey, they need me, and I need to be needed, and all that kind of thing. So, if you can balance your consumption and having fun with contribution, and if you can balance your contribution with creativity, taking time for yourself to make, to do, to have fun, I believe if you look at your retirement and you look at these 4 C's and you look at the balance, you're able to go from each one, focusing on one at a time. We talk about a balanced life, but life never really is balanced. You just keep trying to do a better job of, hey, I need some me time, or I need some give time. I need some family time. I need some alone time. And that I found is those 4 C's, at least for now, until I come up with better ones, seem like a great list of ingredients that we can put together to create a retirement and a life that is enjoyable, worthwhile, and meaningful.
I believe it 100%. There's so many studies that will back everything that you just said, because it does change your entire perspective of your life once you enter those retirement years. It's almost, it's almost like ending a marriage in a way when you leave your work. You spent 8 to 10 hours a day with that person, quote unquote. I'm using air quotes on a podcast, which is very effective, with that other partner. And all of a sudden that relationship is gone. And it was a relationship, good, bad, or indifferent. It was a relationship, and it changes everything. So tons of studies out there. And so if anybody has any questions about this and just kind of what your thoughts are and maybe some other ideas that you have, how can they get a hold of you, Ray?
Sure. Best spot to take a look at us would be at our website, privadawealth.com, Privada wealth.com, and you can contact us there, and happy to talk to you.
And as anyone who grew up in the time frame you and I did together, we all know that there is a 5th C, and that 5th C is for cookies. Thin mints, right. Caramel delights, whatever it is. But again, that 5th C can be great or horrible. It's all about moderation and balance, right?
That's right.
All right. Thank you, Ray, for your time today. I appreciate it.
You bet.
And thank you for listening to the Return on Lifestyle podcast with Rey Descalso. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Ray comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family and get updates about when he's selling Thin Mints or any other cookie he decides. Thanks again for listening today. For everyone at Privada Wealth Management, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Return on Lifestyle podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Privada Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider for any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The following program is sponsored by Privada Wealth Management, which is solely responsible for its content. Advisory services offered through J.W. Cole Advisors Incorporated. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial Incorporated. Member IFNRA, SIPC. Privada Wealth Management is an unaffiliated entity from J.W. Cole Advisors and J.W. Cole Financial. The opinions expressed by Rey Descalso should not be construed as specific investment, legal, or tax advice. All economic and performance information is historical and not indicative of future results. Investing may involve the risk of loss of principal. Any tax advice on this show is not intended to be used by any person for the purpose of avoiding U.S. federal or state tax penalties that may be imposed on such person, and each listener should seek advice from their tax advisor or legal counsel on topics that arise from the show. Nothing should be construed as solicitation of an offer to buy securities. The preceding program is sponsored by Privada Wealth Management, which is solely responsible for its content.